item was
Different.
so just like an informational.
Hi, everyone. Calling the meeting to order, January 23rd, meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee for Sonoma County. As always, we will start with introductions and we'll go.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tanya Nara with the SCTA and RCPA. Elizabeth Tyrese, Sonoma County Regional Parks.
Edie Takata, City of Roanoke Park.
Ashley Cotter, City of Sonoma.
Craig Scott, City of Cotati.
Rachel Eid, City of Santa Rosa, City Bus.
Hunter McLaughlin, Sonoma County PI. Stephen Hunter, Sonoma County PI.
Brendan Barrett, Town of Windsor. Mark Rincon, Sebastopol.
Torina Wilson, Santa Rosa.
Derek Montani, City of Cloverdale.
David Britta, SCTA, RCPA.
Shauna Gaz, SCTA, RCPA.
Larry Zimmer, City of Healdsburg.
Chris Barney, SCTA, RCPA.
Margot Ocañas, same organization.
Adam Garcia, SCTA, RCPA.
Steph Red, SCTA, RCPA.
Nichols, SCTA, RCPA.
And Bjorn.
Bjorn Gittberg, City of Petaluma.
And online,
Ross Clendenin, SCTA, RCPA.
Pamela Swan, Sonoma County Ag and Open Space District.
Steve Urbanik, Sonoma County. Are the jurisdictions outweighed by SCTA staff here, for goodness sake? What, it seems like 2-to-1. I don't know.
it just feels that way because of the two titles. Next up is public comment. I'm not necessarily seeing anyone for public comment. Approval of meeting minutes from December 5th. Does anyone have anything to add or change? All right.
I didn't see my name on the list of attendees, but I saw a check mark. I was
So would you like to be here or would you like to not be here?
here.
You need an alibi?
That I actually go to the.
Something's going on.
Going on lunch extended. I can be added.
All right. Drew, so noted.
That Edie read the It's my fault. I'll make that correction, certainly.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. With that, if there's anyone opposed to approval of minutes, seeing none, passes unanimously. On to number 4, hiregov.com, demonstration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe we have Justin from HireGov online to give us a demonstration of a grant tracking tool that we've been looking at potentially to have SCTA, RCPA have access to this tool that tracks federal, state, and local grants, and also potentially open up licenses to the jurisdictions if it's something that you or your staffs or other city departments might have uses for. This is a great tool to look at all sorts of grants and track grant awards and grant opportunities. And we thought it'd be something that could be valuable to everyone. So giving a demonstration for you today. Now turn over to Justin.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
And see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you guys so much. I'll be relatively brief here. But HireGov is a market intelligence platform for basically federal and state and local spending. So we track opportunities, awards on both the federal and the state and local market. And so a lot of folks will use us for monitoring money sort of as it flows from kind of the federal government down to states and local entities. And we'll track, what grant opportunities as they become available on the federal level, grant awards as they happen. So you kind of know what agencies, are receiving money, whether it be kind of, at state or local or, nonprofit or transit organization, et cetera. And as well as, some grants that are put out as well at the state and local level, that comes from that federal funding, as well as things that are come from other funding sources. As well. So again, I'll go through pretty quick here some of the things that you can do in the platform, then also happy to answer any questions as they come up here. So I'm here, I'm going to start here on sort of the top of the funnel, as it will, on the federal side of the platform here, under opportunities grants. This is basically where you can sort of track federal grant money as it sort of starts to become available as an opportunity. There's a ton of different filters you can use in here. Most common folks would use, such as yourself, would be like applicant type. So if you want to limit, grants that are available to certain types of organizations, whether it's a county government or city or township, or there's a number of other options in here as well. You can also search here by keywords, for example. So when you want to see grant opportunities that come out, that meet certain keywords or meet certain grants categories or funding instruments or that sort of thing, you can set up those saved searches here. And then when there's an item of interest, you can click in to get additional information on the grant. We'll typically have sort of whatever the government description of the grant is. If you click here on summary, we'll give a summary of what exactly, usually a little bit more detail than what the publishing agency gives, what exactly the grant is for and how to get it. Overview information, timing, eligibility information, award sizing, contact information here. We'll have all the documents, there's AI tools and stuff like that in here to if you want to ask questions of the documents, ask for like basic responses, outlines of responses and stuff like that. We will also have here potential applicants, which really kind of gives an idea of, hey, for this grant program, this agency, what are sort of the types of organizations that tend to receive this type of grant. So I'll give you an idea of, hey, am I kind of in that category of folks that, regardless of what the eligibility requirements are, am I the type of group that tends to win this type of grant? And then once the grant gets awarded, that'll show up, that'll populate in here as well. And there are tools for tracking things that you're going after. You can mark things as favorite or no bid. There's corresponding filters for pulling up those things that you favorited or marked as no bid in here as well. We do also have like a pursuit management system in here. So basically you can add things to a pipeline and then sort of track them through those stages in those pipelines. So if it's, qualifying to, developing a proposal, submitting a proposal, tracking win losses, reasons why you won lost, all that sort of thing you can do within the platform as well. Just in the interest of time, I'm not going to go super in depth into that, but it's a lot of folks use that for kind of just staying organized around the things that you're pursuing. So that's the federal grant opportunities. The next sort of part in the funnel I'll go down here is federal grant awards. And so this includes both what we call prime grants and sub grants. So prime grants are going to be grants that the federal government gives to an awardee. And then sub grants are going to be if that awardee then goes and gives a grant, to another entity. So if the federal government gives a grant to, the California Department of Transportation, that would show up here in the prime. And then if the California Department of Transportation in turn goes and gives money to, some agency within California or elsewhere, that will show up here in the sub grant section. So a lot of folks do, and what we recommend doing, is coming in here, kind of putting, a target location in here, potentially, like a grant program, or again, sets of keywords in here. And that will kind of tell you, what grants have been awarded or are currently ongoing, in sort of a market that you define here. And one of the reasons why this is valuable to look at is, and I should point out, you can save a search here and give the save search a name and sign up for alerts. So you get alerts whenever any new grants get awarded. And that's helpful for two reasons. One, because if you see a peer type organization, receive a grant, that might be something you might want to look into. Is that a grant program we could potentially tap into? What have they gotten this grant for? Really just kind of monitoring the market and the grant awards that are getting made. Again, either direct from the federal government or from, having a sort of intermediary there, which might be a state level entity or, other kind of in between type agency there. But also, if you do see, for example, hey, again, I'll make it California Department of Transportation just received, this grant, then that they have this money. And it might be, a lot of times between the time that a state agency or a university or whatever gets a grant And then they then, put out a grant opportunity that then goes out to local agencies. That can then be 6 months to a year. So if you know that, hey, this agency just received this grant money, you have time to kind of prepare for that long before it ever shows up as sort of a grant opportunity, from that agency. So a lot of folks will use that to do outreach beforehand. We're just generally kind of prepare of, hey, we know this organization has some money. Let's kind of prepare for kind of going after that kind of pocket of money. And the last piece here, the state and local. So you click here on state and local and then go to opportunities here. This is going to have all sort of like state and local opportunities, contracts and grants and stuff like that. So, same type of deal here. We've been doing it. You can set up, a filter here, for a jurisdiction, and then, set up different filters here to kind of filter for when, grants or other sort of pockets of money kind of become, available, at a state level or other sort of local agency kind of level here. And then all the sort of tools we talked about on the federal level are available here. So you can, track items, favorite items, mark things as no bid, and you can add things to a pipeline if you do want to kind of manage things in more like a pipeline type format. So those are probably the most relevant tools. There's a bunch of other tools in here, which I won't go into in depth, but there's tools for kind of finding, more in bulk. We have a tool called the Partner Finder, which basically is a tool for figuring out like who the leaders are, who's sort of won money in certain grant programs and stuff before. So a lot of times you can kind of go in and copy strategies by finding the leaders in here. We do track a lot of officers and stuff like that. So if you're looking to find who kind of the key people are in a given organization, there's tools for that. And a number of other kind of things in here, but just in the interest of not taking up too much of your time, I'll kind of pause there and ask if any sort of specific questions.
Through the chair, I have a question for the county of Sonoma. Been working with grants for a number of years now. What sets this program apart from other tracking tools? I've used a number of them over the years.
Sorry, was that question for me?
Yes, that is.
Okay, so sorry. I think the big difference for a lot of folks is that we cover sort of equally both the federal and the state and local, and that a lot of times by the time something becomes a state and local, again, if I'm making it up, if a California state agency receives a grant and is then going to be, dispersing money or making money available to local agencies, you really want to be tracking that, from probably 2 years before that happens, when the federal government is like first putting out that grant opportunity, because that allows you to be well positioned for that money, sort of long before it ever becomes a grant opportunity that the state of California or whatever is putting out. So I think that the big thing is being able to kind of track the money from beginning of initiation and down below as well. I think also the fact that we track the award data, and there's a lot of, I didn't go fully into every little bit of detail here, but we track all the award data, both prime and sub. It makes it very easy to pick a peer type organization and see kind of, okay, what have they done, and maybe what could we be doing as well. Or again, there's funding sources that you've had before, pretty easily tracking, hey, that funding source, not only have they not only what are sort of opportunities are they putting out there, but hey, did they just receive a bunch of money, which again is something that kind of allows you to look at things sort of like much further in advance than what you might otherwise sort of be able to do here. Here's an example just pulled up here for County of Sonoma. So there's 2 tabs on here, the prime grants as well as like the sub grants. So the prime grants are going to be the grants that come directly from the federal government, and then sub grants, which are going to come from the federal government to local agencies. So if Department of Transportation, the California Department of Transportation, if I put them in here, I want to know, hey, whenever they are receiving any grant money from the federal government and what it's for. And I kind of know, hey, that's probably going to flow down into, a grant opportunity from them at some point here. And again, you can click in and get kind of, lots of information here on the grant awards and what exactly they're for and timing and award amounts, the opportunities that created them, and all that sort of stuff in here, as well as, again, tracking the other organizations that have received money. That may have been a longer response than you were looking for, but let me know if any other questions there on that.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Anyone else? Doesn't look like there's any other questions here.
Okay, great. Well, I know we've been in conversation with folks via email, so if any other questions come up, don't hesitate to reach out and let us know how we can be helpful.
Thank
Thank
you, Justin.
Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Bye.
All right, on to item 5, IRA Election Pay Program. Tanya?
Drew is putting the slides up as we speak. So thank you for this opportunity to give a brief and high-level overview of the elective pay program. Excellent. So as I said, this is meant to be a high-level overview, and we are working with several partners to organize a more detailed online webinar that will go into more depth and have some actual case studies and examples. So I'll share more information about that at the end of the presentation. I should also acknowledge that there is some uncertainty about the impact of the new administration on this program, but there is information and advice out there saying that for the current tax year, tax code, this process is still available to us, and we'll definitely keep you all posted if we learn something different. And then lastly, just wanted to point out the legal disclaimer. I am not an attorney, not here to provide any legal advice. So this is for informational purposes only, which is probably obvious, but just need to state it. So first of all, what is elective pay? You'll also hear this referred to sometimes as direct pay. So this is a provision in the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed in 2022 that now allows or has allowed for some time tax exempt eligible entities to get direct payments from the IRS for clean energy tax credits. So for a certain set of tax credits, you can submit a tax return and get money back from the federal government. And this was not available to local governments in the past. A couple of highlights of the program. Their tax credits account for about 70% of the IRA. They're uncapped currently, and that's, I think, one of the things that's raised some concern in the new administration. Cover a wide array of technologies, and there's a number of bonus adder incentives that can increase. There's like a baseline amount of the tax credit, and then depending on the adders that you build into your project, you can actually get a higher amount of tax credit, up to, in some cases, 70% of the cost of your project, which is very significant. So this slide shows examples of the types of projects that are typically qualify in the public sector. I believe there's 12 or 13 total tax credits that are available, but these are the ones that are most often used. So you can see that there are projects that fall in the EV infrastructure space, so installing EV charging. There is a requirement to have them, projects that would qualify for this are in non-urban or low-income areas, and that's section 30C. And then down below, section 45W is for qualified commercial vehicles. So this could provide tax credits for your EV fleet transitions, purchase of school buses, transit buses, et cetera. And then over on the right-hand side, there are 2 sets of credits, the renewable electricity production tax credit and the energy investment tax credit. And you can see a list of example projects there, things like microgrids, community solar, rooftop solar, and geothermal HVAC. Now, I have been hearing, and you probably have as well, interest in the new administration in getting rid of the $7,500 tax credit for individual EV purchases. I don't know about the commercial vehicle purchases. That might be also, on the chopping block, if you will. But again, we just don't know much yet in terms of the impact, but we'll definitely keep you posted. So the process itself is fairly straightforward, although as with anything related to taxes, it can become complex, which is why part of this process, there's a recommendation to make sure you have some good tax legal advice if you're choosing to go through this process. But the process requires that you do a pre-filing and get a unique registration number. This is an online website that is still up and running. I just checked before this meeting to get a unique registration number. And then based on the type of project that you're applying for the credit, you'd file the appropriate tax return. And typically the returns are due 4.5 months after the end of the taxable year, and you can request an extension, and I'll give a couple examples of those date ranges in a minute. And then you receive your funds, and part of the process here is to determine how are you going to, what are you going to do when you receive those funds? And I've heard an example, for example, in the city of Denver, they're actually setting up a revolving loan fund so that when they get these tax credits back, they then use them to fund future climate-related projects. So you don't have to do it that way, but that is one example from a jurisdiction. And then these are just a few details about the steps. So first step is to figure out your filing timeline and deadlines. You can choose to select a calendar tax year or a fiscal tax year, and that will then determine your deadlines. Use the pre-filing registration portal, and there's some requirements about timing there as well. File your forms, and then lastly, get paid. And then here's an example of the filing deadlines. So the first example is if you determine that your calendar year, your tax year is a calendar year, so let's say January 2024 to December 2024, you would have to have a project that's put into service during that time frame. So the example here is that you've completed a project, say you've installed some EV charging infrastructure in a low-income community. That was done in August of 2024. So your first filing deadline would be May 15th of 2025, and you could file for an extension until November 15th, 2025. Second example is if you're using a fiscal tax year, which would be July 2024 to June 2025, same time frame for the project, and your first filing deadline would be November 15th of 2025, and you could extend until May 15th, 2026. And the main point to note here is that you have to file your extension by the original deadline. So if you're thinking you want an extension, you should go ahead and file for that before the original deadline. There are a lot of resources available on elective pay, and so the slide deck here includes a link to one online tool that you can use to kind of walk through the process to help you figure out, is your project eligible for one of these tax credits? In some cases, you might be able to link into direct pro bono legal services to help you with your application. So it's really designed to be a one-stop shop for local governments to help navigate what can, sometimes appear to be a fairly complex process. And then there are also a number of online worksheets to help you identify, again, is your project eligible for a tax credit, help you gather the necessary information for that project. And then lastly, a couple of resources that I would highly recommend. There's an elective pay and IRA tax incentives resources page, has a lot of links to documentation, to online webinars that have been presented in the past where you get a lot of information. And then there's a fairly recent document that talks about the second bullet point there on the credits direct pay in 2024 elections that talks about at least the Lawyers for Good Government's take on the impact of the new administration on the tax credit. So you can get a sense of, depending on what your project is going into service, how likely it would be that you'd still be able to access this tax credit. And then lastly, oh no, sorry, not lastly. This is the workshop that I mentioned earlier. So on Monday, February 24th, we are planning an online Zoom workshop from 11 to 12:30. Our target audience is anyone who is responsible for clean energy projects, could be, facilities, fleet, or climate and sustainability, finance directors and legal counsel. One of the recommendations that I've heard several times is that this is not a process you want to enter into by yourself, that you want to pull a team together of your finance person or, finance director, legal counsel, as well as the project manager. So as I mentioned, this will provide a more detailed overview of elective pay than I've provided here. And we're planning for a panel discussion, including someone from the city of Denver and also in California, a couple folks, to kind of walk through the process they went through to apply for elective pay credits And in one case, they've received their money and kind of how are they dealing with that? They're going to talk about lessons learned, best practices. So I think it'll be a really helpful session if you're interested in learning more. And then this is the last slide. I just recently learned about an effort to gather signatures and submit a letter on behalf of cities and mayors to encourage our legislators to support keeping elective pay in place. So if your city is interested in helping to support keeping this excellent source of funding available, then we'll make sure that you get this updated slide deck with the links to the letter that's there for sign on. So
Is it getting to our elected officials in a different manner as well, or is this it?
I haven't shared it yet, but yeah, we'll definitely get it out in other vehicles as well. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions that you all might have.
Any questions?
Just I wanted to say thank you. I just messaged our city manager's office with this info and I
Great.
think they sound excited. So,
Great.
yeah, thank you.
And Healdsburg was already aware of it all, so.
Excellent, excellent.
No other questions for Tanya? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if I could, just for a second, going back one item, the hiregov.com. So was that a presentation just to make us aware? So if we wanted to follow up and purchase this software, or is that something SCTA is looking into that we would share?
Yeah, so SCTA is looking in procuring that on behalf of everyone. The annual license is $5,000 a year for up to 50 users. So we thought we could do that for a pretty nominal amount and then just provide accounts to everyone that wanted to use it in the local jurisdictions. So it's something that we wanted to just judge, is this something worthwhile that you might use? And since it's a fairly nominal amount, we thought that it's something that SCTA could take on.
Okay, so were you looking for feedback from the group at this point?
That would be helpful if anyone has any thoughts on it. We're already leaning towards probably getting it, but we just wanted to share with the committee before we go out and purchase it.
Okay. So with that in mind, because we kind of went over that quickly, does anyone, is anyone, I guess, opposed to SCTA buying that and sharing it? And does anyone think they would be using it if it were available?
We'll try it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna say, playing with it rather than him just running through it on the screen would be far more useful, I think, for us to know if it is gonna be useful, but.
Right.
All right, sorry that we didn't close that out, probably as we should have, but thank you.
Thank you.
All right, onward to item 6, the comprehensive transportation plan. Sonoma moves 2050. Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to. Okay. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick update on the comprehensive transportation plan and the project list update and submissions. So I'll have a more robust presentation next month, but just wanted to give you an overview of how many projects were submitted and the overall schedule. So we received over 100 new project submissions. So big volume this time around. So thank you so much for your interest and for submitting those projects. So with those new project submissions, that brings us up to 363 total projects in the CTP. So healthy list. Along with that, we had pretty extensive project updates across the board. So those are well underway of being implemented. And we tracked 34 completed projects as part of your submissions this time around. So making some progress on actually implementing some of that. So I did want to just emphasize that the project list is financially unconstrained. So yeah, a lot of work. Thank you so much for the submissions. Those are all in our database right now. So I'm working on the presentation materials and slicing and dicing that to get to you all in February. So I believe it'll go to the TTAC first in February, then the TAC. So I'll have all of the projects, in a big table. If you want to preview, reach out and I can provide something before that goes out as part of the agenda. Then in March, based on any comments and recommendations from TTAC and TAC, we'll go ahead and take that to SCTA to review and for approval of that draft list. Then from April till June, we'll do a high-level countywide performance assessment. So similar to what we've done in previous CTPs, where we've looked at the county as a whole and all of the projects as a big package and looked at future growth forecasts and kind of how that impacts things like VMT, travel times, emissions, things like that. So after that, we'll go ahead and start compiling a draft CTP. We hope to have something together by October, have a number of weeks of public comment available for the draft CTP, and are shooting to adopt a final CTP in December of this year. So pretty short timeline, but we're trying to make this a really focused update. And a big piece of that has been this project list update. So yeah, thanks again for your submissions and working with us on this. And yeah, look forward to sharing the full list next month.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone have questions?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Next up, the Sonoma County Transportation Model, existing conditions update for 2023. Adam?
Yes, good afternoon. So I'm here just to give a very quick update to check in about our progress with the Sonoma County Travel Model update. As you probably have heard, we're trying to update our existing conditions from 2019 to 2023. So this will help provide more accurate evaluation and scenarios that we would play out for the various development projects, land use updates that would require some type of CEQA analysis. So we've been working with the PAC and have heard from most jurisdictions on updating land use and the transportation network, excuse me. I think there are just a few outstanding, waiting to hear back from Petaluma. I think we're working with some staff there to get those updates, and then also with the county as well. So I'll be reaching out separately just to make sure those updates are looked at. So essentially, we're looking at changes in road type, in lane capacity. So a lot of the any road diets that might have happened between that time period, 2022 to 2023. Speed reductions, I know, are on the horizon, but if anything happened during that time period, also we'd love to be able to account for that. And yeah, so we'll be reaching out, but yeah, we're close to wrapping it up, and then we'll be moving on to the next stage of looking at the forecast for 2050. So I'll end it there and see if there's any questions.
Not seeing any. Thank you for the update.
Right, thank you.
All right, item 8.1, Measure M and Go Sonoma invoicing obligation status.
There, these are standing items that show up in your packet every month. This is just your way to track where your appropriations are for the funding that is used for Measure M and Go Sonoma.
You want to roll into maintenance of effort?
Sure thing. Both Measure M and upcoming Go Sonoma have a requirement for maintenance of effort reporting that is due by February 15th of each year. And I mentioned this at the December meeting, I think. Your state reporting for your LSR funds that reporting is due by the 31st of December. So you should have this information pretty readily available to you. And so I try to remind you then that, hey, you're doing this, you might as well do it for the Go Sonoma or for the Measure M funds also. So this is when I start tracking. So this month and next month, I will be tracking for you who has submitted their reporting and who hasn't right now. It's just Santa Rosa.
And Healdsburg.
And Healdsburg, yes, Healdsburg did submit very recently. And that did not make it onto this list before the TAC packet. went out.
Santa Rosa has submitted.
Santa Rosa has
Okay.
submitted.
I
We
was like,
submitted-
wow,
we
I'm the only
submitted
one
in
who didn't see
December.
that. I thought I did that.
Yes, you absolutely
Great,
did.
okay.
And Healdsburg did submit and it was, but it was not in time to get into the packet. So I will start tracking. Hopefully you guys can all get it in by February 15th. Let me know if you have any questions about what maintenance of, you shouldn't have any questions about what maintenance of effort is, but I'll be happy to talk to you about it if you do.
It's so much easier than it used to be, but going off of the report. Next up, if there aren't specific questions on that, is the Go Sonoma quarterly reporting.
Yeah, so this is new. This is, so you guys have been doing quarterly reporting for the Go Sonoma projects. Those are the competitive projects that were awarded during the SCTA funding program, cycle 1. Not all of them, but for the ones that were awarded for Go Sonoma, we are tracking those, the progress of those projects quarterly. And so it's not tied to when you do your appropriation, which is much closer to the way that we tracked it for Measure M. It was sort of after the fact. This time we're trying to track them before you ever get your money so that we can track the progress and make sure that we can identify if there are going to be any roadblocks or if there are going to be any, sorry, that was probably a bad phrase. If there are going to be any barriers or if there are going to be any, anything that would cause delay, or if you need assistance from SCTA, then we can help identify where those problems might arise and help deliver these projects in a timely fashion. So we are, you guys have been doing this for about a year now, but we are going to start providing that quarterly reporting directly to the board so that the board members can also track these projects. So we wanted to provide you with what we will be providing to the board to make sure that you have the opportunity to review it. I mean, generally we post what you submit to us on our website anyway, but it goes through a couple of different people and formatting issues and everything. So we want to make sure that what we are presenting to the board is accurate and current. I did have one person from Healdsburg let me know that one of the info sheets did not get updated properly, so I was able to fix that. So in the Citizens Advisory Committee packet, it is updated, but it is still outdated in this packet. But we do want you to review it and make sure that it's right before we send it to the board. So, and we will be doing this on a quarterly basis, so you will see them, then it will go to CAC, and then the board will see them. And that will happen quarterly throughout the year. And it will get, hopefully we'll start delivering projects. Some will drop off the list, but we're going to get more once we get the SCTA funding program cycle 2. So this is going to get more robust. So we do need you to look through it and make sure that what is represented is accurate.
And sorry, Shauna, did you say when you wanted comments back?
ASAP. And hopefully it should look pretty familiar. You've already submitted the reporting, right? You've already done on the hard work. Just make sure that it's, that it looks like what it's supposed to look like when you look at your sheet.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can add, we are planning to take this item to the board on February 10th, and we'll be posting that agenda on the 3rd. So if you can get us any corrections end of this week or early next week, that'd be ideal.
Okay. No questions, comments? All right. That's what you're gonna be. Item number 9, regional information update, 9.1, inactive obligation, informational item.
And this is also a standing item, Mr. Chair, where we provide you with the federal inactive obligations as is posted on Caltrans's website. You look through it and you let us know what the status is of these projects, particularly the ones that are languishing on the list. This month, all of the jurisdictions except the county has removed their projects. So well done.
Okay, 9.2 PID work plan.
So the project initiation document work plan should be also familiar to everybody, but just as a quick background, projects on the state highway. Local projects on the state highway require, if they're above a certain threshold of funding or complexity, require a project initiation document in order to move forward. Caltrans no longer pays for these. This has been the case for a decade now. So if you would like to move a project forward, then you need to enter into a contract with Caltrans and develop a project initiation document. In order for Caltrans to be able to plan on how much their workload will be, they ask each of the county transportation authorities to let them know what their 3-year work plan is. We do this annually. So we've provided you with the list of what has not yet been delivered, and we are asking for input from you all about anything that needs to be added to the list before we take this list to the board. We think that we've properly or we've adequately captured what we are aware of, but if there is something that needs to move forward on the state highway system that you are aware of that we are not, then please let us know so that we can add this to the list. It does cost money. It takes about 150 to 200K to produce a project initiation document, plus you need to acquire a consultant and that sort of thing. So it can be upwards of 250 to get that moving, but it is required in order to get any project into Caltrans's pipeline.
So does anyone have comments on the PID list shown in the agenda report? No, and if someone's going to review that or go back to their office, is there a timeline on getting back to you?
Yes.
ASAP?
Yes, again, it's pretty much the same timeline that David mentioned on the last item, Mr. Chair. We are trying to get this put together for the SCTA board meeting on February 10th. So if you could get it to us before the 3rd, that would be ideal. I have tried to highlight where the yellow parts on this list are where we have some information, make sure that that's accurate. And the orange bits are, I don't have any information. So if you would like to help fill that information in, that would be great. Because those are the columns that Caltrans really pays attention to. When do you really want to start it? What kind of funding do you have? And what do you think it's going to cost total?
Excellent.
Purpose and need is also kind of important.
What's the threshold to get on this list?
To get on this list?
I mean, what project would trigger?
On the state highway.
It depends on the complexity as well. Some projects can be done via encroachment permit. Some projects can be done through the DEER process. I believe City Cotati is doing right now for the West Cotati Avenue project. Other projects become more complex if they have retaining walls or other kind of non-standard features. And so Town of Windsor has a project that's doing a combined project study report, project report, and it goes on up in complexity from there. So it really just depends on the type of project, the size, dollar amount. It really is kind of case by case.
But generally, it's if it's going to be more than an encroachment permit, then it's going to require some form of a PID document.
We're looking for the DEER process for the Highway 116 widening. Seems like that should be on here.
It shouldn't,
that-
it doesn't need to be on the PID work plan since you don't need to do a project initiation document with the DEER. So it's a more streamlined process than the actual
Got
PID.
it. DEER is the next level up. Yeah. Complexity. Okay.
Great. No other comments? I do have several questions, but I will probably take those offline because they're my project specific.
Okay.
Moving on, 9.3 TFCA program update recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're going to be doing a group effort on this one with myself, Margot, and Dana. We do have some slides, I believe. Drew, if you want me to share, I can share as well, so I can drive.
All right.
I don't know why I didn't play sports since.
All right, so for those of you that may be familiar with this is a transportation fund for clean air. So historically, since 2006, this has been a program that's been largely split between the transit operators with direct funding shares for Sonoma County Transit, San Francisco City Bus, and Petaluma Transit. And then also a competitive portion that's open to any of the jurisdictions within the Bay Area Quality Management District's boundaries, so Pittsburgh to the south. And that funding amount for the competitive portion has been rather small, usually in the neighborhood of 75 to maybe 125,000 a year. So not very much funds to go after. In the last 10 years or so, there hasn't been much interest from the small cities in pursuing that funding source, given the administrative burden of TFCA funds. And so we're looking at revising the board criteria that was adopted way back in 2006 to amend it to be a fully competitive process and no longer have a set aside for the transit operators and make the entire amount of about 500 to 600,000 a year that we have annually for TFCA available to everyone in a competitive process. We're proposing that competitive process to be based on cost effectiveness. So whoever submits the projects that are the most cost effective and the emissions reductions per dollar would be the ones that we'd be recommending for selection. And this change is being proposed because it's becoming more and more difficult to replace electric buses with, it's becoming difficult to replace buses with cleaner buses, whether you're replacing diesel or hybrid buses with CNG or now fully battery electric buses. They are still able to meet the criteria, which is usually about a maximum of $500,000 for cost effectiveness, which is being increased this funding cycle to $550,000. But it's becoming a case where the transit operators having to split money between maybe 1 to 2 or 3 buses to meet that criteria. And so you're talking about $50,000 to $100,000 contribution per bus. That takes a lot of administrative burden for not only SCTA staff, but the operators to deal with that, but it is a critical funding source for the operators. As I mentioned earlier, we're also having very limited participation from the jurisdictions in the competitive portion. Recently, the competitive projects have been submitted by City Petaluma Public Works or City Santa Rosa Public Works for bike projects or SCTA for transportation demand management type projects. In the past 10 or 15 years, we used to get projects from Round Park or Windsor or some of the other smaller cities, and it's just, I can probably guess it's not worth your time. So just going on the next slide, you can kind of see since fiscal year 2010-11, there's been kind of a shift in who's applying for funds. And most recently, we did have some projects, I believe, from Windsor and Round Park in more recent years, but the last 5 years or so, it's really just been City Santa Rosa and City Petaluma, along with the transit operators submitting funding for projects. And you can see here how much funds have been going to the competitive portion versus the transit operators. It's usually staying pretty similar dollar amounts over the last 3 years. And here we have a slide showing the distribution share between the competitive projects in yellow and then the 3 transit operators. In the last 3 fiscal years, we had projects for bike parking in Santa Rosa and Petaluma. And then all 3 years, there was funding for SCTA's Go Sonoma commute program, our transportation demand management program. And then in fiscal year 23-24, there was a Petaluma bike lane gap closures project. And then last fiscal year, excuse me, this fiscal year, we had a project for a bike lane gap closure in Santa Rosa. So I should share, this policy change has been rather controversial with the Transit Technical Advisory Committee. They do need these funds to provide local matches for electric bus purchases. Given the controversy, we are pushing back the board approval of this revised policy to March to have a little bit more time to have some discussions. But at the same time, we need to have this call for projects happen because we have to budget these funds in our preliminary budget in May. Given that, we're suggesting that potential applicants look at the application process and the cost effectiveness worksheets that are required for the application, starting that now, anticipation of some board policy on whether or not there's a set aside for the transit operators happening in March. Then we had opened a short call for projects March 11th with applications due 2 weeks later to give us time to review them prior to them going to the Transit Technical Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee in April for their approval, and then the SCTA board for approval in May. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. As I mentioned, there was a robust discussion at the Transit Technical Advisory Committee, and I don't know if Rachel wants to add anything, but I'm available for any questions you may have.
Well, and with that, like a tee up, I might as well just chime in. And yeah, and I just really want to be here at the discussion. Yes, there was a robust conversation at the TTAC, and you know, I'm the only transit operator here, but just to, I think, reflect the discussion among the 3 operators that have been receiving this form of allocation, it does end up being, you know, sometimes a piece of our operating budget, sometimes it's local match for some of our charging or electric bus projects. And it does, you know, fill in some cases a unique role in our funding program. That said, just representing my point of view from Santa Rosa, I definitely understand the reason for the staff recommendation in terms of the challenges around funding transit projects with this funding source and the meeting cost effectiveness, as well as the potential opportunity to have these funds go to other projects and be available to more jurisdictions in the county. We have a very unique issue in Santa Rosa this upcoming cycle, which is really why I'm here. Just wanted to be on the record just with the comment that, you know, we have been using these funds for a pretty unique purpose that not a lot of funds can fulfill for us, which is to help support our Fare Free program for youth. Great news is with Go Sonoma coming online, the increment for Fare Free Transit can cover most of that cost to keep that program going, but we do have a gap. And this is one of a couple of funding sources that can fill that type of a gap. So we are looking, and we've been talking with SCTA staff. There's a state low carbon transit operations program that could also be a solution. So we need to understand that a little better. Certainly we'll continue to compete for these funds, but you know, we're looking at Plan B. So this might come as really just to be on the record with the concern that we have specific to the unique role that TFCA plays or has played for that program. But again, you know, completely understand the reason and the policy reasons behind making this shift. So I also just want to be on the record saying that as well. So with that, I'll turn it back.
And looking at that, I mean, for Roanoke Park, I now have numbers about our usage of Sonoma County Transit, and it's pretty high in the Fare Free program. So, you know, well, one side of me wants capital dollars, another side of me says, well, we've already been approached, we are helping to fund our portion of Fare Free. So if it can come from TFCA, then at least from our point of view, why not? But help me understand, can the transit operators still compete in a competitive program for Fare Free, for this money for Fare Free, and it'll still be cost effective when it goes to AQMD?
Yes, Fare Free programs and electric bus charges would still be eligible for competitive funds, and I believe the Fare Free programs would perform rather well in this cost effectiveness type format potentially. So it's something that the transit operators could submit on their own for competitive funding if we did do this policy change.
David, do you anticipate a maximum award amount, or would it vary on a year by year basis based on the number of applications received and how competitive they are?
We haven't specified a maximum award amount. It's something that in the past, the competitive projects have ranged from 50,000 to like 125,000.
Right. But that's more of probably a function of the amount available.
Funds were available.
Yeah.
We are also trying to lower the administrative burden on staff for administrating several small grants and all the reporting that goes with that. So we would be open to having larger grants, and maybe it's 1 or 2 or 3 grants versus 5 or 6, but without knowing what applications we get and how they score, we couldn't give you an answer at this point unless someone wanted to propose a maximum amount per project. And that's a consideration we could take to the board.
Do you have a draft scoring criteria so we would know what types of projects would score over others?
We don't have a scoring criteria set. It would solely be based on the cost effectiveness calculation Excel tool that the ER district uses. And so that tool, once you put your inputs in, will tell you based on the length of bikes facility or type of bus being replaced or other type of project, it'll give you that cost effectiveness score. So you would have to do a little work, but then you would be able to figure out what scores well or not.
And I've only obviously played around with that tool for bike projects, but from your perspective, are those those ratios or those calculations fairly equitable for all project types? Are there certain project types where it's really easy to meet those CE ratios or get a higher CE score, I should say?
I'd say it's fairly equitable, but based on the ridership or the usership of the facility, it really can improve your score. So if you had a very high use bike facility next to a busy road, it probably would score better than, say, a residential street with just a bike lane. I should say that our transportation demand management program has historically scored pretty well over the years, and SCTA does have other funding sources that we will be applying towards that program, but we're also interested in continuing to apply for TFCA funds to continue that program. And as mentioned earlier, Santa Rosa's Fare Free program has historically done pretty well using TFCA funds.
No other comments? Anything else you need from the group?
So staff would appreciate your recommendation to the board to either approve the policy as staff are proposing or to recommend some kind of adjustment to the policy.
Okay, so Healdsburg and Cloverdale will vote. Is anyone opposed to approving what has been put forward or recommending changes to that?
Is there an option where there could still be a proportional amount that goes to the transit operators, but it's smaller? So if there's something where there's a small gap for one of the transit operators, they would still have a smaller amount of guaranteed funding. And then, but the pot of the competitive could get bigger. Is that possible?
If the TAC wishes to make that recommendation, we're happy to take that to the board as a consideration.
I think my main opinion, and I'm kind of on the fence about it, is I want more funding available for bike ped projects countywide. Obviously, we all want that. But then I don't want transit access to get harder. Like it's kind of at the expense of another form of non-vehicle transportation that we all support and are working towards improving. So does that then mean that City Bus or Sonoma County Transit ends up with more barriers that they have to go figure out a solution for that might not be there, where they have a solution right now with TFCA funding? I don't think I have an answer to that.
Same.
Yeah.
That's what my concern is too.
So I guess if there's an option where it's based on population.
Yeah, so the current distribution is based on the coordinated claim population percentages, I believe. I'd have to look at how we came up with the split between the competitive and the transit operators, but we could propose some kind of revision to that or a floor if that's the will of the committee.
I'll just offer, I mean, I appreciate that, Tarina, and I think for some of the projects that the transit operators have used these funds, or there could be other options too, and I, appreciate the offer by staff to continue a bit more discussion with us. Another thing we brought up at the TTAC was, maybe there's a transitional, maybe there's phases, right? To phase in maybe a completely cost-effectiveness approach, because I do understand the staff perspective. You get all these little grants, that's not an efficient way to run a program. There's pressure from the air district to be completely competitive. So that's another thought that was discussed at the TTAC, for what it's worth. I also think that, we can get by, with, we have Go Sonoma, we have other things coming in. So, I just want to be clear that I do think we have some options as transit operators. I think for the Fare Free program, that's really why I'm here, is I think for the Fare Free program, it's a little trickier because not every funding source can be applied to that type of program. So I just wanted to clarify a little bit there.
Did it seem from the other, because I didn't watch that meeting, from the other operators that for what they depend on the TFCA funds for, they could fill elsewhere, or was the sentiment we rely on the TFCA funding?
Well, I think it becomes a part of, local match, right? It's another source of local match for things like charging and electric buses. But, I think that it's very true that it's getting harder and harder to meet cost effectiveness. So I don't want to be disingenuous, and I feel like I'm representing 3 different operators and probably not doing a very good job. But I think, I think the challenge has been over the past few years that it's getting harder and harder to use TFCA for that very important purpose, with the changing cost effectiveness and ability to do so. So, I mean, that's, I think, a lot of what's behind this change. So I do think, in some respects, we're all going to be forced to find other ways of doing those things, right? With some of the other capital funds available to us, in the transit world. So, I mean, I think that's, an honest read of the landscape, because even if we have a formula allocation, it's not always the case that the projects we have available can meet cost effectiveness for TFCA. So that is the reality for sure. So if that's helpful.
And I will share from Petaluma Transit. I'm not speaking for Petaluma Transit, but I did meet with Jared earlier this week to discuss this item. And my understanding of how they've used the funds is they're banking the funds basically every cycle. They get their $85,000 and then they bank that. And after 4 years, they have roughly 25% to go towards a new battery electric bus, which a new one costs what, $1.4 million. So with our smaller allocation of $85,000, it takes about 4 years to get that local match piece. And then in hopes that you'll find the remaining 80%, 75-80% elsewhere. So, again, to Rachel's point, it sounds like there are other potential avenues to fund electric bus purchases. But he did like this source as a reliable, consistent source that he knows he can count on to help support those efforts. And I think their goal is to replace all of our buses with electric buses by 2035. So.
Mr. Chair.
Do we have someone online?
Yeah, it's all Steve Urbanic with his hand up.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think it's been working pretty well for a long time. So I guess I would ask if we could figure out a way to keep the program the way it is, but able to meet the cost-effective requirements that are put out there today.
Mr. Chair, if I may, staff is also open to trying maybe like a 1-year trial of this policy to see, does it work? Do we need to do adjustments? This is something we're also open to if the committee wants to just propose like a temporary policy.
Okay. Not to get all formal on you, but does someone want to make a motion?
I moved to have to try this as a temporary policy.
A 1-year temporary policy. Do we have a second?
I'm curious if to what extent is Santa Rosa relying on this for Fare for Youth before Go Sonoma takes effect?
We'll still compete in the call, right? And, per the comments made, I mean, hopefully, we'll score. I mean, the nice thing is actually the amount of money we need to continue the Fare Free program or to fill the gap is not as much as we usually receive from TFCA, right? So that's a good thing, right? So we're still going to compete. We're still looking at another funding source. So, I feel like we have some options. I'm not panicking. I'm just raising a concern. So I think.
Yeah, I know we're on a park is, for off the cuff, we just for for Sonoma County Transit, we just got into an agreement with them to pay for, as we should, a portion of the Fare Free program at the tune of $40,000. That's kind of, I don't know what the off the top was of TFCA in this program for Sonoma County Transit, but and I'm not saying we're going to get out of paying $40,000, but it could be the gap for our share or something equivalent for Sonoma County Transit for Fare Free. So it means that we try out the program, and maybe for us, maybe we apply. I don't know. Can we apply for Fare Free for on behalf of Sonoma County Transit? I don't know. We can try it out. That's why I'm moving to suggesting trying out a pilot program, and we'll try that in order to preserve what I think is important for Fairfield. Do I want to put it into something else? Oh yeah, I can. So I'm just speaking here as me to go back to my organization to see what they really would want to do, but that the opportunity is there makes sense to me. And I was thinking about a smaller set aside, but it sounds like that it's empty, it's AQMD that's saying, well, it's not, we want you to do a competitive program. So it sounds like the push toward a competitive program is from somewhere else. So that's why I'm proposing this motion to try it out.
All right, we still have a motion.
I'm prepared to second. I will just say I like the idea of a 1-year pilot because of how limited this funding availability has been for the competitive portion. I think that's probably why you haven't seen as much interest from smaller cities throughout the county. And it would be interesting to see, with a higher dollar figure available, what kind of projects might come out of the woodwork. And so speaking out kind of against our own self-interest in Petaluma, where we've been able to access these funds because others aren't, I really would encourage everyone to, when this does go out, to take a close look at your new active transportation plans and find out what might score well. And hopefully we'll see this money well spent. So with that, I would second a move to a 1-year competitive pilot.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone opposed? All in favor, say aye. All right, that passes. We haven't done that in a while. All right, with that, we are on to item 11, roundtable discussion and informational item. Does anyone have anything to share with the group? Yes.
Actually, item 10.
Oh, sorry. The upcoming SCTA RCPA meeting on February 10th. We talked a little bit about that. Do we have others to look at?
The one speaking gig I get in the meeting. Now, just want to let you know about the items that are going to be presented to the board on February 10, include the second quarter financial report, cooperative agreement with the county for Go Sonoma, the quarterly reporting that was presented today, the Measure M annual report, the fiscal year 25-26 project initiation document work plan. Those are all on consent. On a regular calendar includes the chair and vice chair appointments, the SCTA RCPA annual report and overall work plan program, the SCTA RCPA strategic visioning and organizational alignment report, legislative principles, the final adoption of the active transportation plan, and a report out from the transit ad hoc, and then the activities reports as per usual.
Great, thank you, Drew. And also 10.2 is the upcoming meeting schedule.
Yeah, so I have some printed copies up here, and I did include them in the agenda packet of all of the committees and board meeting dates for calendar year 25. So you're more than welcome to take some for your desk if you would like.
Great, thank you.
These are all, except the only correction I need to make is for TTAC in February. That'll be held on February 19, because the County of Sonoma will be observing Lincoln's birthday on Wednesday, the 12th.
Good for the County of Sonoma getting an extra day off.
We don't have the 2 Mondays anymore.
All right, if there are no questions on that, opening it up for any informational item. Anyone have anything to share? Great projects out there. What's that?
Yes.
We're very excited that the Trail to Crane Creek is out to bid.
Nice.
Second time. So that closes February 6th, Thursday, February 6th.
Second time because the first time, okay. Did you modify it?
Yeah, because we're a city and we know streets, but regional parks knows trails. So we had advice from them to we'll go out again.
Nice.
I don't design a roadway for a trail.
What? I mean, it's just.
So you just,
No, when you have a few trucks or something.
did you just change the structural section or is it more than that?
Seeing it.
Yeah.
Grading.
Katati has had, or not Katati, Roanoke Park in the past has had buckling under just asphalt, right?
Oh, asphalt buckles on everywhere. in this
Yeah,
city.
but I mean, with the expansion and
Yeah.
contraction of the clay soils in the park, I know that Burnt Park.
This is on volcanic ground.
As you go up the hill.
As you go up the hill, so, yeah, so if you have any trail contractors. probably too.
Awesome. Anything else?
Actually, if I may, I want to acknowledge Edie having great quotes for the city of Runner Park with your active transportation program in the Press Democrat article that came out and really speaking to the importance of what we as a community are doing related to active transportation.
Got it right.
Highlighting
They got some
Runner
of this right.
Park's efforts. So I think it was good messaging for all of us.
I had a question about that actually, because that article was amazing. I've noticed a trend, which it's not new, but a lot of the articles about bike and ped stuff does not highlight the positives of bike and ped stuff. So like that daylighting article came out and the headline was, "You're gonna lose a ton of parking." Oh, shoot. Instead, it could have been pedestrians are about to get safer on the streets or whatever. So I saw the article about the Roanoke Park ATP and I'm curious, did someone with the PD approach you? Did you approach them? Because we're having our ATP get adopted within the next 4 or 5 months and I want a nice article too. How do I get people excited about that?
It's fair.
Surprised.
Yeah.
It's even, yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah.
It's correct. My title was not correct, but that's okay. I'll take the motion. It's fine. Yeah, no, we weren't approached, so I'm surprised. I know I want to take note of our beat writer and see if hopefully she'll stick around.
Yeah, I'm curious.
You-
See if an advocacy group can help me get a good article somewhere.
You usually just make a call and just tell them, hey, I'm wondering if you wanted to write a story on this.
Yeah.
We're doing it, and they usually will bite.
Okay.
Almost always.
Okay.
Interesting on the ATP, when we had I took our draft to our council with Fair and Peers, Dana was there. And I don't want to say it went off the rails, but it was way longer and way more difficult than I ever expected. It was like almost 3 hours, that item alone, I think 2 hours and 45 minutes. It went on, and then just Monday or Tuesday, I took the final to council. And it was a completely different story. It was all, this is great, you guys are doing such a wonderful job. And there were still, some comments and it still went on. It still took almost an hour, but it was really interesting. And when I saw your article in the paper, I thought, oh, thank God they're looking at Roanoke Park and they're not going to be looking at you.
Go again. Because we didn't adopt yet. That was informational. So there's another chance that it could be, Jekyll and Hyde and we just.
Yeah.
I hope not, but.
Yeah, like I said, it all ended up going really well. We put it forth a ton of effort on the outreach and, trying to answer everyone's questions. And so, it was the work hopefully paid off, but it was interesting. Anything else?
Go ahead, Bjorn.
Okay. We're hiring for a senior traffic engineer. Posting just went out, so please help spread the word. And we also just got the key elements of the 5th Street Neighborhood Greenway in place. That's a 1 mile stretch from Mountain View Avenue to Western Avenue. So kind of South Petaluma to downtown. It's actually the only low traffic street that connects that area of town. And it's got a lot of cool traffic calming elements, quick build, bulb outs, speed cushions, a couple of traffic circles. And we need to fill in the bulb outs and traffic circles with some paint, but for the most part, it is in and functional. So
that's cool.
Check it out. Yeah.
Is there something on your website showing details of that?
Yeah, we have a project webpage. We don't have any photos of the project on the webpage itself, but there's a lot of info about it there.
Cool.
Otherwise, you have to come check it out in person. Yeah.
Where did you say it was?
5th Street between Mountain View Avenue and Western Avenue.
Give me a reason to go to Petaluma again. Rich,
I just had a real quick one since I'm hardly ever here. Bring a little transit flavor. So we have a really interesting project being implemented in Santa Rosa, probably around mid-February. It'll be done, and it's a prototype of a new regional transit wayfinding program that MTC is developing. And we're one of two sites in the Bay Area. The other is El Cerrito del Norte, BART. So we feel very special that Santa Rosa is the other one. But, why it's of general interest is, this is the prototype installation that will be, Santa Rosa Transit Mall, the downtown center is a smart station, and then some breadcrumb signing in between. If this is a successful prototype, it's going to move on to a pilot phase and then a broader implementation to all the transit systems in the Bay Area. So that would include all the other systems in the county and the facilities, transit facilities throughout Sonoma County. So keep an eye out if you happen to be coming through Santa Rosa after about mid-February. The signage should all be up and in place, and there'll be lots of ways to give feedback about it. And, it's kind of a chance for us to get in on the ground floor of what will ultimately be a regional approach to signing for transit. So wanted to pass that on.
great, thank you. Nothing else?
Mr. Chair, if I may, so as mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out the call for projects for the TFCA program at a later date. And along with the call for projects for the TDA Article 3, Margot Conyas from our staff will be taking those programs over from Dana, so look out for those emails. And then also our fiscal year 24 Safe Streets and Roads for All grant that was awarded last November. We're still working on executing the grant agreement with Federal Highway Administration. That included funding for projects in Cotati, Windsor, Roanoke Park, Paloma, and Santa Rosa. At this point, on Monday, one of the President's executive orders froze all funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which included basically all federal surface transportation dollars. That order got clarified last night, but I haven't heard if FHWA has reopened their payment systems yet. We haven't heard anything from our FHWA California Division contact on our grant agreement, but until we have that grant agreement signed, we're not holding our breath.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any federal grants or federal monies, we're kind of in uncertain times and expect the unexpected at this point.
But if there's a grant agreement in place, that's all moving. It's just the ones that we're waiting.
If it's obligated.
Yeah.
Those are pretty usually iron tight, but even executed grant agreements can run afoul of the federal government, as high-speed rail found out in the last administration.
Yeah, very uncertain times. All right, with that, thank you for coming. It's good to have a transit person here. It happens occasionally. And we are adjourned. See you all in a month, or actually I might. Elizabeth will see you all in a month if I'm not here.